Happy New Year.
Hi, Happy New Year to you.
I'm gonna pause the recording until more people get on. Recording back on. Hello, Jeff. Hey, who's calling
Hi,
from?
it's Avery.
Oh,
202
Avery.
numbers, Avery.
Avery, you're on the 202 area code? Since when?
Yeah, that's been my phone number since college.
Oh, okay. I guess I never noticed. Because I always think about...
Well, usually I call him from my laptop.
Yes. All right. So, as people start getting on, welcome to the Goal 4 Connected Networks call. And we are now being recorded. And Jeff came up with a great topic. Did I put in a question for today? I don't remember if I did. Oh, yeah, actually, I didn't do a popcorn question, so you are all going to have to think of it on the fly. So as other people join us, and we'll give them a minute or so to come join. Let's see if I know anything that's going on. There are, the foundation didn't reopen until last week. So there hasn't been a whole lot going on as far as the Kaufman stuff. And I've been on vacation longer than that. I was MIA for a couple of weeks. I was globetrotting around Asia with my son, who I had not seen in 18 months. So it was good to actually...
Oh, that's amazing. I hope you had a wonderful time.
We did. We were sick on and off. And then I got back to the States and I have bronchitis. So there's that. But we got to go to 3 countries that we'd never been to, Vietnam, Cambodia, and Singapore. So that was a lot of fun. And now he is off in New Zealand, where he has a working holiday visa. So I'm not getting him back anytime soon. So we had this question on a previous call. So I'm going to ask you, since I've just shared with you my favorite holiday moment, which is spending time like climbing the temples of Angkor Wat with my son. What was your favorite holiday moment? And I will start with Hassan because I've already asked him this question before.
I have to come up with a different answer, actually. So actually, I thought about it since, an hour and a half ago. Actually, I did something. We had unseasonably, I guess it's global warming. You don't have to go to a tropical location anymore. Tropical locations come to Detroit. We had 50-degree weather right around probably the week before Christmas. It was in the 40s. I think one of the days actually got close to 60. So I did something, not that it's totally fun or anything, but because of the warm weather, I did something I hadn't done in a long time, which is I did my own oil changes on my cars, and I did tune-ups on the cars.
Wait, you're back on mute. We missed the last part.
I said it's probably not fun holiday stuff, but it's stuff that I probably have never done around Christmas in the Detroit area, so it was totally different.
Popcorn?
Let's see. I will go to Jeff.
So this is going to be really lame. My great, wonderful, special, fantastic thing that I did was I didn't work for like 3 or 4 days. I needed like 2 or 3 weeks of that, of not thinking about ecosystem building or writing or any of that stuff, and that felt really good. So yeah, nothing special, but was rare for me. So I will popcorn to Sarah Sterling.
So one of my favorite holiday moments actually was right before Christmas. I went back to San Francisco, where I'm from and where my family lives, but we actually, all of the conveners team converged on San Francisco for a solid week or 5 days to do a team retreat together. And so it was really cool being able to share San Francisco with my team members who I only see virtually most of the year, and also be able to spend Christmas with my family, because since I live in Guatemala City year round, I haven't actually been able to be back with my side of the family for about 3 years. So that was really special.
You've got to call on somebody, Sarah.
And I'll pass it to Heidi.
Hi, so I had a special birthday this holiday season. I won't tell you the number, but that meant that I got to spend the day with my entire family and go to we went to the Museum of the American Indian and saw an exhibit on Peru, and then went to another museum, I can't remember which one it was, National Gallery, and saw an exhibit, a Duchamp, no, it wasn't National Gallery, it was the Hirshhorn Duchamp exhibit and Pat Steer exhibit, and then went out for dinner at this really great ramen restaurant. And when we got home, we played a game, and it was the best day ever because every member of my family was in a good mood. So I will pass it now to Eric.
Hello. Let's see, joined in a little bit late, but thank you. I'll say the one thing that I shared, actually, Cecilia was on a call earlier, but I'll share again. We had a little New Year's night gathering of friends to kind of balance a bunch of the family stuff that had already happened. So it was great to be sort of with family of choice folks and reconnect with friends at the very beginning of the new year. So that was, I think I'm answering the correct question. And I am not sure who else is on the list.
So you've got Avery and Tyler.
Oh, let's see.
Wait. What did Tyler say? In courthouse, so no talking. Oh, all right. Well, we can say statements.
Avery.
Sorry, trouble getting off of mute. So I had a really lovely time with family up in Oregon, plus one to what Sarah said about the communers retreat. That was definitely a highlight. And then the other big benefit was just getting to see Tavi, who, you know, is a year older now and actually like has some concept of Christmas. And she got a new scooter, which she is obsessed with, which was fun. And I got to spin fire for everybody up in Oregon, and doing that to like Moana and Frozen for my daughter was pretty epically amazing.
That's wonderful. Okay. So we're going to let Tyler take a pass, although if he wants to share his favorite holiday moment, he could definitely type it into the chat. And we're going to have Jeff kick off the topic of discussion for today. And off you go, Jeff.
Have to unmute. So I may not get this quite the way that I phrased it for Cecilia, but so many of you may know that I've been doing some surveying around ecosystem building, techniques, tools, principles that ecosystem builders follow and use in their daily practice, as well as what ecosystem builders think are the key leadership principles for ecosystem building. So I thought, in the spirit of connected networks, maybe we could share each one here, kind of popcorn perhaps, two things. What leadership skill that you have witnessed or seen in a fellow ecosystem builder in another community, preferably at the field level, and also maybe an example of a tool or an approach or a resource that you have found another ecosystem builder in another community uses that you think is very intriguing. So I don't know, does that make sense? Does anybody want me to kind of expound on that a little more, or does that kind of make sense?
No, and
Eric's laughing.
Eric's laughing because he's trying to think of what he can say. Will somebody also keep notes in the... I
will try to keep notes of this. And then Cecilia, since you kind of know where I'm coming from this, can we start with you?
Sure. Okay.
You can set the example.
So the skill that that I see most beneficial in ecosystem builders is the skill would be listening, actively listening. And I think the trait is being humble. So So I think those in combination are kind of a secret sauce as far as ecosystem building is. It's the difference between ecosystem building and ecosystem building. So then, as far as a tool that I've seen, you know, I still haven't seen it exercised well in the ecosystem, the entrepreneurial ecosystem building community, but in community building. And one of the things that I would really still love to see is an old school forum. Slack is great for connecting kind of thoughts, quick questions and whatnot, but it doesn't lead for deeper discussions with archives and that's what I mean, an old school forum where you actually start on a thread and all of the topics kind of line up to that, and it's searchable and it's archivable and you can pin it. And I miss that. And the best example of it I've had is in my Springsteen community, where we had different forums, and so we could talk about the concerts, and then people who were sharing music would have another list, and then we had a current events discussion area, which we called the Fight Club. And so you didn't step in there unless you wanted to really delve deep. But because each topic was a thread, then all of those thoughts still get captured, and that doesn't happen in things like Slack. So there you go. And since Eric is nodding his head, I'm going to popcorn to Eric.
Let me just interject one other thing. It doesn't necessarily have to be like a tool, like a software tool or something like that. Another thing I'm kind of looking for is approaches like if you really resonate with Brad Feld's Startup Communities Boulder Thesis, or if you have read Victor Wong's Rainforest Blueprint and really resonate with and use his blueprint principles, looking for stuff like that you use as well.
Community by Peter Block.
So let's see, I'll take the bait. Let's see, I think, and Cecilia mentioned something of this, when I look around the country at sort of ecosystem builders that I feel like I learned from, or at least try and take something from, there is that sort of that humility, there's that sort of that calm, they may be in front of a crowd from time to time, but it's clearly not why they're doing it. It's part of the role, but it's not their reason for doing it. And I think of, let's see, I'm thinking of the folks up in Portland at the moment, but I think that's just partially because it's who I am and the way that I am. I like seeing that in people across the country. So a lot of different places. Rick Trossi is one of the folks that comes to mind. Was that
humility? Was that what you said?
Humility, yeah, sort of this humbleness that they bring, that they're, and maybe in some ways the term like servant leader kind of thing. I think that's part of it, where they're showing up, but it's not necessarily for themselves. It's for the community first, and then they do whatever it takes to do that. I'm not sure if it fully answers your question, but the original answer that I had that I'm going to stick to is I am somewhat jealous of the communities that have a really good news platform. So whether that's the folks that work with Technically, or around the country, a number of different communities have got there, and Technically in Philly and Baltimore, and I think I want to say DC as well. But the ones that have kind of a homegrown or a local effort from a variety of local entrepreneurs that are helping get the word out about their ecosystem, oftentimes it's more startup focused. That's something that I always wish we had here, and continue to have that on the short list of things we'd like to see. The one that I'll specifically highlight for the moment, just threw in the chat, is Start Land News out in Kansas City. I think they do a really good job of trying to make sure that the information is flowing, and I think some places sort of start with a resource hub, and I get the value of that, but it seems like it's tough to maintain that. it feels like if there's more traffic that's based on some news, that kind of ongoing flow of information about activities and highlights of the folks who are making things happen in community, that feels to be like the gem that I would like to include in our local crown. Anyway, so that's what I'm going to go with for lack of a better thing. I will kick it over to Heidi.
Okay, so I guess I would say in terms of traits of ecosystem builders would be sort of they're problem solvers, but on sort of a very conceptual large scale, you know, where they're including a lot of different moving parts in solving a problem. And they're very inclusive, and so those are some of the traits I would attach to an ecosystem builder. In terms of a tool or anything, I guess I don't really have anything. I didn't have time to think about it. So I'm going to pass it over to, who didn't speak? Tyler? Can Tyler speak?
I think Tyler has to be muted because
Tyler's
he's in a courthouse.
I can't speak.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, Jeff? Did you have to speak?
I have not yet, but since I passed to Cecilia first, I will say, sorry, go ahead, somebody. Who's that?
I was just willing to jump in.
Oh, okay, well, I'm going to pass on to you first, Avery. Go for it.
Okay, cool. So when I think about the traits and things, one of the big ones is when I was reading the research from Janeway Skillern about kind of network entrepreneurship, network nonprofit building, this idea that I loved what you said, Cecilia, about the like ecosystem building. I actually posted that like immediately on LinkedIn when you said that, because so often entrepreneurship is about that front man and that ego and like needing to be the face and needing to be out there. And when you're doing network building, it is that art of lifting up everyone around you. It's almost like you almost never want to take credit because you want to be able to say the amazing things that everybody in your network is doing. And so I think it's a little different from just humility, because it's definitely not false modesty or anything like that, but it is this aspect of knowing that the power of the network is in individuals within it being able to see one another and their successes. And then in terms of a tool, I mean, Zoom was huge, but I think, you know, joking aside, like, I think there's a lot of really great facilitation techniques, and the framework that I've been diving into a lot is around awareness, alignment, action, and not expecting groups to be able to just jump straight into collaboration, that there's so much pre-work that needs to be done to be aware of what's going on in the network, aware of who's there, what they care about, what their priorities are, and then finding some of those alignment opportunities that help people see like where they're walking in the same direction, and from there being able to take action together. So that framework has been really instrumental to me in thinking about the design of networks and communities. I will toss it. I'm trying to remember who hasn't. Hassan, I don't think has spoken yet.
I know Hassan stepped away for a second. Are you
Yeah,
back?
I just came. Yep, I'm back. I would say Startup Communities by Brad Feld. As far as, you know, traits or attributes of ecosystem builders, I wouldn't say anything other than what's been said. Humility, humbleness, somebody who's a really good listener, and stuff about kind of being in the back and not being out front, because just like what Avery said about folks always want to be the face of you know, the ecosystem builder thing. So yeah, that's what I have. But I think the Brad Feld stuff is what I would say. And Sarah, you haven't spoken yet, have you?
Yeah, I would love to go next. I definitely agree with what everyone has said. And one of the things that I really like to focus on, especially when working with entrepreneurs in ecosystems, is creating authentic, vulnerable, personal spaces. So one of the things that I've been working on over the past 5 years with SOCAP is helping entrepreneurs, when they go to that conference, get out of the pitch zone and really connect on a personal level to why they started their business in the first place. And so I think creating those safe spaces for people to be vulnerable and talk about how hard it is to be a founder, and failure and challenges that they're experiencing is super, super important. And, you know, supporting entrepreneurs in feeling that that's okay and it's safe to do that, and no one's going to be, you know, not investing in them or their failure as a founder if they're experiencing challenges. And I think one of my favorite books for just creating spaces of conversation is The Art of Gathering. So you guys probably already know that book, but it's one of my favorites.
I think we're back to you, Jeff.
Okay, so, and I will type, in case somebody isn't watching the chat, Tyler typed in Servant's Heart with really big ears. For books, I subscribe to Startup Communities, Brad Feld's book, for EBs, and E-Myth Revisited for Treps. I'm not sure what that one is. What I would say is I've been doing a lot of research on this lately. And a couple of books I will highlight. I had read Victor Wong's Rainforest, which is a really big, thick, meaty book. Great stuff, but I recently only discovered, thanks to Tiffany Henry, I think actually pointed it out, he's got a much smaller, like 60-page book called Rainforest Blueprint, which has really succinct principles for ecosystem builders to put into practice. So that's one that I've read over like in a couple of hours. And I think there's lots of great tips there for ecosystem builders. Is that the Blueprint one, Cecilia? Or is that the big one? You're muted.
Almost 300 pages.
Okay, so there's a much shorter one, like 60 pages, called the Blueprint. And so that's really good. Another one that I've been, which is really weighty and meaty and very academically written, is Alistair Brett's admired complexity, I think. So he's kind of building off of what Victor Wong did in the Rainforest, and really smashing that against complexity science and how we can incorporate complexity science principles in ecosystem building. It's very lots of esoteric stuff, but some really good insights as well. So those are two things I would point out. And the skill that I would have to say that I have been leaning on is systems thinking and system leadership. Admired Disorder, thank you, that's the one. So I think those are mine. And so here we are 23 minutes after the hour, and we've already wrapped up the—
Oh, look at that, we solved everything. There is on the FAQ page of the dashboard, there's a link for the reading list, and that document should be curatable. There's also in the Slack channel. Sarah, I don't know if you're in the Slack channel. I will make sure to add you. Okay, so in the Slack channel, there is there's a channel for the reading list, so everybody has access to that. But it's that list that we have is currently over 100 books, which is fabulous. And then people in the ecosystem keep writing books, so that's even more fabulous. But now we also have added resources like Jeff, Tyler, and Avery have EB Hub, and Yuval's doing the Keystone podcast, and Annika does her social ventures. So really, we're talking about ecosystem builders and ecosystem building. And I know all of you are talking about Brad Feld, and I kind of challenged one of the Brad Feld notions when I wrote my blog piece about things I no longer believe about ecosystem building and entrepreneurship, which is I don't fully accept give before you get, because I think it comes from a place of privilege. Not always, but it's easy to give before you get if you have stuff to give, or you know what to give, or all of those things. And sometimes you come into the community and you're like, I don't know whether I'm in the right place, or I don't know what I have. And the fact that you show up and you want to be there, and I think it's okay to get a little bit. So So there you go, Brad. I'm happy to talk to Brad over drinks sometime and talk about all that. So, admired disorder, are you talking about the
That's Alistair's
Alistair's
book.
book? Yeah, I'll try to find it while you're now you're gonna have to come up with harder questions.
Yeah, you guys went above and beyond. Let's do this then. Okay, so let's add another wrinkle to it. Is there most here have probably been to ESHIP or SCN summits, and know different not ecosystem builders, ecosystem builders in other communities. Is there an ecosystem builder who you think exemplifies some aspect of leadership in ecosystem building? And if you have a story about that you'd like to share, that's another one we're kind of trying to suss out. Anybody? Cecilia, I know you had one mention somebody who's actually on this call. If you want to reference that or not, I'll leave that up to you.
Ooh, I don't know if I want to reference that because they're on the call. I will tell you a story about what happened when I first started consulting with the foundation, and we were sitting around a table. We came on board October of not this past year, but the year before, 2018, and in November of 2018, we're at the inaugural ESHIP Summit meeting to get ready for the 2019 ESHIP Summit. And we're sitting around the table, and there's Andy and Philip Gaskin and Victor and Christine and I. And the night before, Christine and I had this wonderful dinner, and we're all kind of a little buzzed with excitement on, oh my gosh, we get to do this epic stuff, and how exciting is this? So we're going around the table, and everybody's introducing themselves, and Andy, scrappy entrepreneur, ecosystem builder, recognized by the Obama administration. Here's Philip Gaskin, community leader, worked on the Obama campaign, headed up Pennsylvania, blah, blah, blah. And so I'm sitting there, and I'm starting to feel like this real imposter syndrome. And I'm also feeling really intimidated right now, right? And I don't have a scrappy entrepreneur story. I'm like 20 years in the travel industry, worked in corporate America. I'm probably older than a lot of the people sitting around the table. So now it's like circling around, and it's really intimidating. I mean, I'm at the Kauffman Foundation, for goodness sakes. So then we get to Victor, and Victor has this magic about him in small rooms and big rooms. So he says, right now we're at this tension point in history. We're at this point in history where what's emerging is coming up against the powers that be. So you're seeing a lot of tension. It's like what happened during the Industrial Revolution. And so Brexit, white supremacy, the Me Too movement, all of this stuff this is where the power lies, and this is what's emerging. And so what I'm trying to say is the work that we're doing in entrepreneurial ecosystem building, this is 20 and 30-year work, because we're in this transformational time. And so what I want to say is we're not going to solve for this by the next summit. And chances are we're going to get it wrong. And I looked at Christine, and I'm like, what? Did the vice president of entrepreneurship for the Kauffman Foundation just say we're going to get it wrong? Are you kidding? Like, check, please. I am in the wrong room, right? Because if you can't get it right in this room, we're all in trouble. And then he said, the thing is that we have the best people at the table to get it right more than we're going to get it wrong. So what I realized what happened during the course of what he said is my shoulders started to relax, and I realized that I am in the right place, and that now I can come with my best ideas because there wasn't that pressure. of, oh my gosh, what am I going to say? Like, if I say the wrong thing, I'm going to look like an idiot, right? And so later on that day, I saw Victor in the cafeteria and I said, look, I want to thank you for this opportunity. I want to thank you for this space and the grace not to get it perfect coming out of the gate. And so I feel a lot more comfortable, and I can come and tell you my wildest ideas and my dreams. And, you know, maybe it'll be right, maybe it'll be wrong, but at least we're going to try. And he said, yeah, we're going to get it wrong 1,000 times. And then he leans over and he says the words that I will never forget, which is, isn't this fun? And I remember that this is fun. This is like the most fun ever. We get to touch people's lives and we get to really change them in an amazing way. And not everybody gets to do that every day, and we get to do that all the time. So that's my story. And I'll write it down for you one day, so.
Oops, I wasn't muted. I hope I wasn't being noisy there. So, well, luckily you're recording, so that will make transcribing that a lot easier. Anybody else?
It's Avery. Hi. So one story that comes up for me is Zach Anderson and the team at Converge for Impact. They're, you know, the reason they exist is building networks for communities. And one of my favorite kind of times was actually at Opportunity Collaboration, just sitting with him and with Christine Lai, who obviously I all know, and getting to just like properly geek out about ecosystem building, whether it was from communities who are looking at rebuilding faith for, you know, this new secular age and bringing that back into play, or folks who are looking at entrepreneurship, or folks who are looking at, you know, multi-stakeholder agreements to be able to help move forward different like environmental initiatives. There's just so much of a common thread around the lessons of that coordination piece being kind of a unique skill set, and not something that we've really trained people to do. And so that's, you know, part of what I keep showing back up for this community for is that formalization, because we haven't trained people to do this, and we haven't articulated fully, like, well, what does it look like when it's good? What does it look like when it's toxic? You know, and how do we learn from one another instead of everybody just sort of like falling into it because they have some sort of like gut reaction or natural affinity to it. And yes, that was a really fun experience back in October.
So Avery, who was the name of the person you mentioned in addition to Christine?
Zach Anderson.
Zach Anderson.
ZACH.
Okay, just wanted to capture
that.
All right, if there's anybody else, I will say, anybody else have any questions they want to offer and get input from the community about? Opening up the agenda to suggestions.
I'll tell you what, we talked about a subject a while back, and I want to bring this up because it keeps popping up in community and touching on the ecosystem builder thing. What do you do with the terms that I've been hearing wrapped around things like community czars? What do you do about that? What do you do in your community to try to bring it back to community and get away from the people who are the gatekeepers, the silo holders, the ones that divide? Because you will always come up in those in community, and I think that there's got to be some good practices about how to get away from that. Heidi?
Are you calling on me, or do you think I had something
Sure.
to say?
I thought you might have something to add. You live in DC, girlfriend. There is plenty of ego where you are.
Yes, there is. I mean, I guess I do think that, it's important for everybody to have a voice and to contribute. So even if somebody is sort of taking over, while that is, that can be really frustrating, I think one way of dealing with it is to engage them in a way to give to the community that makes them feel like they've participated, and ensuring that, again, that sort of feeds their quote unquote ego, and hopefully, that, once they've sort of done once they've contributed, they can take a step back and let other people contribute. So sorry, you caught me off guard. I wasn't really, I didn't really have a good answer.
A great suggestion to channel their energy. That's fabulous. Sarah, you and Avery have I mean, you've got to come up against this thing when you're convening people. So, so I'm curious to hear from Sarah and Avery about that.
Avery, do you want to take this one first and I can fill in?
No, I kind of want to hear what you're going to say.
At the test. So I've been with conveners for a little over a year now, and one of the things that I've noticed that I think is part of our special sauce is really bringing everyone to the same page and same level, right? So I think even though you're dealing with, you can deal with both, let's for an example, like donors and the grantees that they serve, and bringing them into the same room and creating a common community, creating expectations around language, creating rules of how the conversation is going to go, and trying to create a common space where people can really share how they're thinking and feeling. We've done this for foundations. We've done this for some of the contracts that we worked with. We've done this in actual sessions at conferences, or even if you're bringing together different parties that they all hold that same similar sort of egocentric ideals. Kind of breaking down those barriers and finding commonalities, I think, is kind of the step one that we use, whether it's on a personal and or professional level, and the sort of goals around impact that they want to achieve. I think that's a big part of it.
And I'd add to that another piece is to just never pretend that power dynamics don't exist in any room you walk into, and how often even just naming their existence can get you, 60% of the way there, and then using facilitation techniques that actually can disrupt those power dynamics can be so powerful in terms of identifying hidden assumptions that people have about one another, building empathy across different stakeholder groups or different roles or positions, and bringing to light kind of hidden information that tends to not get sourced if the holders of that information are in the low power position in the group, whether that's a line worker versus a CEO, or a grantee versus a grant maker. I'd say that's been a common thread through a lot of the work we've had to do.
Yeah, definitely, I agree.
That's helpful. Eric, you're, as you've got a couple of months under your belt with Forward Cities, those are interesting because as you have those councils, there's agendas and egos all around, right?
Oh, sure. I mean, and of course, every community is different. So I think, I've taken a role with Forward Cities about 5 or so months ago now, and working on the ESHIP Communities project or initiative with them that's funded by Kaufman. And in a way, it's something of an experiment to look at how can we apply the ESHIP principles and some of the ESHIP goals to different communities around the country. So I'm looking at I'm embedded a little bit in 3 different locations, which would includes Kansas City, north central New Mexico, which we're calling Rio Grande for these purposes, and Long Beach. I'm not sure if I've got a great answer to the question here, but I think some of the things that other folks have mentioned all along are very much a part of that. And it's interesting to see how in some communities it's more maybe about power imbalances, and that's something we need to be much more aware of, versus other places where it's more of, big trust issues around neighborhoods or disenfranchised communities. So I think we're still sort of grappling with, is there a process that allows us to address this in a useful way to help us move forward? But also, one thing that we try to keep in mind is, and one thing I think we have the benefit of being able to do, since this is a longer term engagement, is we can't address all of these things, at once, at one single time. So if there are things that we know are important, but it feels like we need to build relationships and trust, et cetera, before we really dig into them, that's something we won't quite put it on the parking lot. We like to acknowledge that that's on our agenda. That's something we want to get to. But we can also acknowledge that we may not be able to do representation on groups that really reflects the makeup of the community. We may not be able to do that from day one. We're going to make a good attempt, but we're also going to say, as we move forward, maybe it's 6, 9 months, 12 months out, as we move forward, we're going to aspire to have something that reflects the roles and composition of the community. So that's my lesson learned so far.
I love that. I think one of the things that I got from the Forward Cities convening last time in Pittsburgh was there's a trusted convener who organizations like Forward Cities brings in, and the trusted convener is somebody who lends their social cred for the meeting, right? And I think that's a powerful thing to find. And I was talking to Fallon Wilson, who a couple of you may know, with Black Tech Mecca, and she has an initiative going on right now where she's trying to engage, and she's being very specific right now with the groups, but it's Christian Black church ministers. So Christian ministers, she says, the church is a place where people gather and come together. They're all big communities. They know how to be philanthropic because they pass the plate around. So all of those elements around a supportive entrepreneurial ecosystem are right in those churches. And so she's starting to connect with specifically Black, so it's underrepresented ministers, to try to infuse the idea of becoming an entrepreneurial hub around that church, because the church building is there and they utilize it once or twice a week. So why can't they utilize it for the rest of the time to build community? So I think it's a fascinating story.
I also think talking about sort of building community around like a hub like that, like the churches, libraries have become a major source for community building. And I see that even, here in DC, the libraries that are popping up are so much more than just book lending facilities. And they've also, I know that when you have a good library in a community, an entire sort of economy can be built up around that. So libraries are a great anchor for especially rural communities, as I'm thinking about it.
So I'm going to put Hassan on the spot. Hassan, I remember you mentioned somebody after our call with the storytelling call in November, somebody in your Detroit community who had an enormous amount of trust in the community. And I don't remember if that was the Skidmore Studios guy or somebody else. I was wondering if you might be able to elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah. think that was James Fegan that I mentioned.
I don't remember the name, but
Yeah, I think that's who that was. Yeah, James was. So James, I think he's kind of taken a step back now because he's married and he's had a couple kids over the last couple of years, so he's taken a little bit of a step back. But he was involved. I mean, he was the local community foundation, Detroit Economic Growth Corporation, just about everybody that was doing anything related to economic development, ecosystem building, engaged James in one form or another because he was pretty well connected at the neighborhood level throughout Detroit and also with faith-based organizations. So any project, like any initiative that came out of city government or out of philanthropy, and if James was the face of it in terms of the outreach, it automatically got credibility. I can't remember if James was at one of, I don't recall if he was at the first ESHIP or not, but I know he's attended Forward Cities convenings. He attended one Forward Cities convening in the past when Detroit was engaged with Forward Cities.
Cool. And I just dropped a link in, Heidi, for what you were talking about. The Urban Libraries Council and the Kauffman Foundation are working to support libraries as a hub.
I will throw one out there, and comes from primarily from an ecosystem builder who's been at ESHIP, Ted Baker in Muncie, Indiana. Really emphasized to me in her interview about making it about the entrepreneur. Bring it all back to breaking down the barriers for the entrepreneur, and this is in light of dealing with the community czars and the gatekeepers, and maybe bringing their attention back to, well, this is about the entrepreneur and making it easier for them and making it all entrepreneur focused versus focusing on the ecosystem builder. So I think he has done a great job at that from when I talked to him.
Is there anything else around connected networks that we should think about, discuss, some topics to come up on future calls?
Do we have any updates on any of the initiatives, or do you want to dive into that?
So I can share that there is some, not a lot, of project canvases that are just starting to show up on the dashboard as they're being shared. And so it's kind of open. So here's the mini epiphany that we've come up with towards the end of the year. You know, the idea of if we put the things out there, that a community of ecosystem builders would come together and collaborate and work on projects and all of that. I think that was a hope and maybe a little assumptive, but the challenges came when you talked about funding, when we talked about how do we come together and collaborate, and how do teams form, and when you have people that like Jeff, Avery, and Tyler, who are just going to turn around and say, hey, we're just going to go do this thing. And for a project like a storytelling hub, that makes sense. For things that are bigger, like a convening about metrics, that's going to take a lot more people, a lot more support. And so not all projects, initiatives are equal. Some can be done together. Some people don't want ownership of because there is no forward movement in it. So what we've done on a couple of calls is taken some of these general topics, like a diverse speaker bureau, and we did a project canvas on a call because it was a good time to be able to sit together and ideate on something that may benefit, but not anybody in the group necessarily wants to own. There are organizations that are well versed and probably well situated to own something like a speaker bureau. SCN, NBIA, something more organizational that has a lot of members. But the reality is SCN probably shouldn't own a diverse speaker bureau. I think they can contribute members to one, but an SCN mission is not to run a speaker bureau, right? So one of the things that we realized in coming up with these project canvases while we're on the calls is maybe what we can do is we can outsource these things like to a speaker bureau and say, hey, here's a list of ecosystem builders who are really good at speaking about ecosystems. So when you have a need, here's a slate that's curated, advocated, that kind of thing, right? That's something that we as a community can do, is to recognize people who are good speakers and put them on this list so that a speaker bureau can utilize them. So, things like that. So one of the things that I'll tell you is happening is that we're looking at during, with the work of the goals is how we're going to mass collaborate on these things. And the realization is not everybody on the calls are interested in the project, and not everybody who's interested in projects are on these calls. So what we want to do is balance that and support it in the best way. So we're still working on it. It's like we're 2 or 3 pancakes in, and we're getting better. And so we're talking about what does community-inspired grant making look like. They've never done it before at the foundation. These are things that we'd like to explore and work on. And so the team at the foundation is working through that, but it's all a work in progress. So if you have some great ideas, share them. We're all ears. And if you have some notions and some things that you'd like to work on, let us know. And as for those 30 recognized projects, if you have a project canvas that you'd like to share, that you'd like to invite other people to get involved with, email them. We'll put it up there, and we'll work on it, because that's what we do, right? We're scrappy entrepreneurial people, and we're going to try something and see if it works. And if it doesn't work out, we're going to pivot and we'll figure it out. So like Victor says, it's still going to be fun, and we're still trying to figure it all out. So does that answer or work on as far as project canvases? Is there anybody else working on a project canvas that they'd like to share? Oh.
It would be helpful, Celia, to be connected to whoever is working on the Speakers Bureau and connecting them with Sarah, because we are working on our own version of that. And it would be nice to at least check in and see if those should be 2 separate things, or if they could build off of each other, or what that might look like.
Okay, and I think that to be fair, on something like a speaker bureau, I don't think there's like one answer. Some of these things, they can only be one of, right? Like a mission or a vision or something. But sorry, but on some things, you can't necessarily, there can be many iterations. On the link that I shared, Sarah, there's the list of people who worked on that particular project canvas. Email me at the ESHIPgoals@gmail, and I can connect you with everybody who worked on it. And if you want to have conversations with them, that would be great. But thanks, Avery. Jeff?
Yes.
What else you got?
I don't have anything else, and we've got 5 more minutes, so I'm thinking it's time for kind of a parting goodbyes or parting. You like to often ask questions to end things, and if so, you do have something. Let's throw it back to you on that. You're muted.
I got nothing.
All right then.
Well, Cecilia, I hope you feel better soon. Bronchitis is awful, and
Thank
so yeah, just sending you warm wishes for a speedy recovery.
Likewise.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you all for your input today. Appreciate it, and hope everybody has a great rest of the day and a great Happy New Year.
Happy 2020, everybody.
Yep.
Thanks.
Thank
you
you.
too.
Ciao.
Bye.
Take care.
Cecilia, is that